Hey, good evening, everybody. We'll just take a couple minutes and make sure we get some make sure we get everybody who wants to be here, and then we'll get started here in a couple minutes. How's it look, Leah? Are we leveling off?
Yeah, it looks like we have slowed down.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We've only got an hour together, so maybe just to kick things off, for those of you who've been engaged in the process from start to finish, just want to offer my appreciation for hanging in there with us. This is a pretty compressed timeline with a lot of work that happens in between meetings, and thus far we've just really appreciated the feedback and the input and the participation of folks. So much appreciation there. For those of you who are just tuning in, this is the third and final town hall meeting where we will be announcing the regulations that we will be putting in front of the director here within the next day or so for his consideration. So it's a pretty important meeting. It's kind of the culmination of a whole bunch of work that's happened over quite a few months, and you know, as you know, in my role, I get to sit back and watch all of this stuff and listen in primarily. But I just want to, in addition to appreciating all of you, I just want to appreciate all of the hard work done by Region 6 folks, fish management folks, hatchery folks. This has been a monumental effort, as it is every year. So saying that out loud, much appreciation to the team there in Region 6. Before I turn it over to James, I just want to remind folks that, you know, these regulations that we're going to be talking about tonight are a byproduct of a lot of conversations that have been happening over the last 2 months with our tribal co-managers. And in most places, we either have signed management agreements or we're anticipating having them within the coming hours and days. You're going to hear about one exception to that tonight, and with respect to the Quinault River and the Queets River, we do not have at this point in time signed management agreements. We've got a disagreement with regard to the fisheries, and just in a nutshell, we're not in a place tonight where we can announce a fishery that we believe is a responsible fishery. That said, we're continuing to communicate with the co-managers. We've got the director involved, and we're trying to get a formal government to government meeting with the tribe between now and December 1st. If we can't get resolution prior to December 1st, we will be closing. We will not, I guess what I should say is we will not be opening the Quinault system. But I also want to say that that doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to have those conversations, and it could lead to a situation where we have an opening after December 1st or announce an opening or cut a regulation after December 1. So wanted to hit that, you know, right as we get started here tonight. James will have more to say about that potentially when we get to the slide showing the regulations, but just wanted to be completely transparent with where we are with the co-manager with respect to the Quinault River and our proposed fishery. So maybe with that, we've got just a couple slides to share with you. Shouldn't take more than 5 or 10 minutes, and then we're going to spend the rest of our time together hearing from you. So at this point, James, I'll turn it over to you. Maybe you can introduce the team and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Yeah, my name is James Losey. I'm the regional program manager for Region 6. I lead a big team out here that is responsible for this management work we're talking about. And I just, again, want to echo Kelly's thoughts there, thanking this awesome team and thanking all the folks from the public that are here to get this work done. So I'm going to just go down my list, make sure everyone knows who joined us at this meeting. So Leah is our host. Hi, Leah. Thanks for all the help tonight. Next on my list, Amy Edwards is a Region 6 stock assessment biologist. Hey, Amy. Erin Couch is in the communications team. I think you've met her in past meetings. Hi, Erin. And then we have a team of district biologists on the phone in the Olympic Peninsula area. Jenny Whitney is leading management work there. Jody Pope is down in the Willapa Bay area, leading our fisheries work there. And then I'm going to skip down my list to Mike Scharf there in Grays Harbor and the southern portion of the Olympic Peninsula. Hi, Mike. Then hatchery operations in the coastal area are led by Joe Kudu and Rob Allen. You met Kelly. And then last on my list is Toby Harbison. She's a research scientist in Region 6, focused right now on coastal steelhead. So thanks everybody for being here. I'm going to share my screen here. And as Kelly mentioned, the number of slides is small. There's a lot of material we want to share in few slides here. I'm going to make sure, maybe get a sign that folks are seeing this okay.
Looks good from my end, James.
Okay, great. And so we'll just jump right in. Maybe Leah, can you help me with this one?
Yeah, so I will run over our directions and etiquette really quick. All callers are muted upon entry. You can type a question. Actually, we do not have the Q&A function enabled, but you can ask a question by raising your hand. If you're calling in, you can raise a hand by dialing *9 on your phone. If you're calling from if you're joining by computer, you can find the hand icon at the bottom of your screen. At the reaction tab, it's a smiley face with a plus sign. When you're called upon for a question or comment, we encourage you to speak up and provide comments live. To speak, you will need to unmute yourself by using the mute button on your computer or mobile device, or enter *6 if you're calling from a landline. Please limit questions to one at a time. If you have a technical issue during the webinar, please drop us a note in the chat and we will help you through it. Be respectful of others, be tough on the issues in questions, not on people or organizations. No personal attacks, insults, or threats. Listen and assume positive intentions for those speaking. Speak and act professionally. No offensive, disrespectful, or derogatory language, including profanity. And again, assume positive intentions. Share questions or comments in written format or online at wdfw.gov/coastal-steelhead, and please limit questions to one at a time.
Thanks, Leah. I want to start by sharing kind of where we've been this season. You can see that the stock assessment work, a focus around steelhead, really comes together in mid-July. That's when all the data, everybody's hanging up their waders, putting all that data that was in Write and Arraign notebooks into the computer, sharing information with tribal co-managers. And then in bold there, you can see we had a town hall on October 20th. Folks can go back and watch recordings of these town halls if you want to catch up on what you've missed. We had another town hall on November 10th. And then here we are, this text in blue. This is town hall number 3. Here's where we're communicating the director's decision on fishing plans. And then there's an expectation that December 1, winter fishing rules will go into effect. It's also worth noting, so there's a website in the bottom right there. You can see that if you copy it, put it into your browser, you can see sort of a more in-depth timeline of where we've been and actions to come into the future. That's our coastal steelhead kind of landing page. Also worth mentioning, there's been a variety of meetings with WDFW Commission and the Fish Committee, and we have additional meetings coming up for this preseason planning process. So I'm going to jump right into the regulations. In the town hall number 2, we heard a lot of proposals from folks. We shared proposals and analysis of those that we'd already been looking at. And today we're going to announce those decisions for these regulations coming up. So we don't really need an agenda slide, pretty simple agenda, but we'll have plenty of time for questions today. So this is small text. I'm going to walk through these, and I want to remind people that this presentation is online currently, so folks can download a PDF if it's easier to see there in your home. So starting from the South Coast and working our way north, the Willapa Bay system, it's expected to be open or planned to be open December 1 through March 31st. It's worth noting this is the same regulation on this system that we had last season. So the general notes here are selective gear rules, single point barbless hook, no fishing from a floating device, release wild rainbow trout, and 2 hatchery steelhead bag limit. Moving up north to the Chehalis River, this one's extremely nuanced, so I want to make sure we go slow through it. So the Chehalis is expected to be open, but this is focused primarily on salmon fisheries. So we're extending the salmon fishery through December 16th. This is into the steelhead management period. So this fishery is scheduled in the Satsop. So this is Schaefer State Park downstream, and the main stem Chehalis. So that's the Oakville boat launch downstream. Want to remind people, Mike Scharf's the lead biologist here. He can help work through these regulations when we're done on this call, like tomorrow and the next day, trying to make sure you know where we're headed. These systems, these areas are selective gear rules, single point barbless hook, no fishing from a floating device, release wild rainbow trout, 2 hatchery steelhead bag limit. I've also posted in here, obviously, a very small summary of the treaty fisheries scheduled. It's scheduled during the same time. This is Quinault Indian Nation, and they're scheduled 6 days during this first 2 weeks of December, again, targeting salmon and estimating steelhead impacts associated with those fisheries. Moving to the Hump Tulips River, extremely similar fishery. The text should be almost identical, open December 1 through 16th. The difference here, the cutoff for this fishery is from the 101 bridge downstream. So we'll be creeling this area and have a really tight estimate on steelhead encounters during the salmon directed fishery. There's a treaty fishery scheduled for this same time. Again, the Quinault Indian Nation is planning 6 days across those 2 weeks. I see there's kind of some typos here. It looks like our text got a little bit out of order, but there's selective gear rules, single point barbless hook, no fishing from a floating device, and again, release rainbow trout and 2 hatchery steelhead bag limit. The next, as we move up, we're looking at the Quinault River. So I'm going to, again, kind of pause on this one. Kelly opened up this meeting talking about 2 systems where we had not reached co-manager agreement. There's discomfort here on the take associated with these tribal fisheries. We're continuing to communicate with Quinault Indian Nation to try to find agreement and provide support for a fishery that we see as sustainable for the sport fishery and the tribal fishery. But I want to mention the proposal on the table right now from the state is a December 1 to March 31 selective gear rules, no fishing from a floating device, release rainbow trout, 2 hatchery steelhead bag limit. And this would occur above the lake. I know a lot of folks on this call are extremely familiar with that upper Quinault River fishery. We mentioned in our last town hall meeting that this improved forecast does leave room for that fishery. And we're confident in our technical work that supports our management objective in that area. But again, discomfort associated with the treaty fishery that is expected to occur for 56 days in that system. I've put an asterisk next to that so that folks are reminded which rivers we're talking about where we don't have co-manager agreement. Moving to the Queets and Clearwater system, very similar. This system is closed. There was a really small amount of potential opportunity in this system based on proposals we heard from folks. So a really narrow margin here to meet escapement objectives. And so there were proposals discussed, but in the end, the margin of error is extremely tight. And there's a treaty fishery proposed that, again, is hard for us to get behind in terms of co-manager agreement. So there's a scheduled 36 days from the Quinault Indian Nation on the Queets River. Before I leave those two systems, I want to just reiterate those discussions, are continuing. We've had a lot of discussions with our tribal co-managers trying to find agreement there. And as Kelly mentioned, this proposed December 1 fishery or the closure in the Queets, those are moving targets there, and we want to make sure we get them right. So we ask people to stay tuned on those two systems, even following the December 1 closures that you'll see. Moving to the Quileute system, we're scheduled to open December 1 through March 31. Selective gear rules, single point barbless hook. We've expanded boat fishing in the Soul Duck River. This was a proposal we heard from a lot of folks. So there is an expansion there relative to what was put in place last season. Specifically, we have fishing from a floating device allowed in the main stem Quileute, below the Maxfield boat ramp on the Soul Duck, below the 101 bridge on the Kalawa, and we're saying below the hatchery on the Bogachiel, but it's important we highlight that Mill Creek is the boundary there, which is a bit below the hatchery. So the hatchery is not the boundary. There's a boat launch associated with the boundary. Here we have released wild rainbow trout, 2 hatchery steelhead bag limit, and a treaty fishery expected to take place for 52.7 days. So I think those are the main notes from the Quileute system. And then on the host system, these are regulations similar to last season. So we're open December 1 through March 31, selective gear rules, no fishing from a floating device, release wild rainbow trout, 2 hatchery steelhead bag limit, and a treaty fishery scheduled for 18 days during that in that system. So I'm just pausing here for a minute and make sure folks, if they're taking notes or want to get a good idea of what's on this slide. And then I'm going to move to this next slide that reminds folks how to ask questions. And Leah, I did have an error in an earlier slide where it looked like text got strange. So I want to make sure that this slide is accurate, that this will help people out and not cause issues.
Okay, and if you're ready for questions, I will start, James.
Great, thanks, Leah.
Okay, our first hand is from Wes. Wes, go ahead.
James, a little bit of description about the dispute that's going on the Quinault and the Queets, maybe the Queets in particular, but only because it's simpler. But either of them, or is there a disagreement on forecast, or there aren't enough fish and they just want to fish the days they want to fish?
Yeah, thanks, Wes. I think the best way to describe it, and I don't mind reiterating it all. It's a good question, and there's a lot of uncertainty here, but we have technical agreement on forecasts, and we shared those, over the last couple of town halls, and we're in a really good place there. And we were, I think maybe I know you were on the last town hall, and I think you saw some of that optimism for the upper Quinault. This is a fishery many of us are really excited about, and there's a forecast that supports it. Our concern really is the level of take associated with the tribal fisheries. And so we know that, that optimism, working with co-managers, we need to make sure that we're providing, access and room for both of us to take that opportunity to go fishing. And with the current proposals we've seen from the tribe, there just isn't a place for a responsible state fishery. And so that's really the rub there, right? Coming to an agreement on both of our shared fisheries, and we just don't have it in that system. So hope that clarifies a little.
Okay, thank you, Wes. And I just wanted to remind folks, I am seeing some questions in the chat. I just want to remind people that we're going to be taking only technical questions, like if you need technical help for Zoom in this Zoom webinar in the chat. The rest we'll be taking live today. And then I see some folks are having trouble finding the raise hand function. There is a smiley face at the bottom of your screens with a plus sign. Some people will also just automatically have a hand that they can tap in the bottom of their screen, depending on what Zoom they have. And our next hand, it looks like it's a phone number ending in 885. Go ahead.
So my question was in regards to the Willapa and the hump tulips. First, my question was on the Willapa, we have selected gear with a 2-bag limit. Is that also with the selected gear included fishing from the boat? And then part 2 question on the hump tulips, it's we have it down from cut off from the 101 down, open from December 1st with the 2-bag limit. Is that selected rules as well, or is it just wide open on the hump?
Yeah, thanks. Those are great questions. And I'm going to take a stab at them, but encourage folks, other folks in the team here that know these systems better than me to jump in if I get it wrong. So I think it's the same answer for both of those. In both the Willapa and the hump tulips, these are no fishing from a boat. And then selective gear rules, which means no fishing with bait. So I would say the hump tulips, we wouldn't describe it as wide open. Rather, it's very selective, right? No fishing from a boat, no use of bait, and then single point barbless hooks.
All right. Yeah. Selected rules, same as last year then, basically.
Yep. I want to make sure, just so that we're really clear, this fishery in the hump tulips, similar to the Chehalis, closes December 16th. So the plan is to fish through December 16th. And if I remember how the schedule looks, that's a Friday.
Okay. So we got 1 through 16 on the hump. And is that also 1 through 16 on the Willapa?
Nope. And so just so we're clear here, I want to make sure folks know they can download these slides. If you can't see them now, they can download them online so that you can print them off and stick them, on your dashboard and make sure you get them right. Or better yet, emergency regulations online. But I'm going to make it just one more shot at this. So Chehalis and the hump tulips are the only ones we have on here with the December 16th closure day focused around targeting salmon. In Willapa Bay, we have a system identical to last year. So this is a fishery from December 1 to March 31. There's some select tributaries there you want to focus on that you're used to them being closed on February 28th, as we see in the pamphlet. But across the board in Willapa, no fishing from a boat, selective gear, closed March 31 for those main stem systems.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I just want to make sure I had my notes correct.
No, that's great. Yeah, good questions.
Thank you. Our next hand is from David. David, go ahead. Looks like David may have some issues unmuting. We will go on, we will go back to him in just a second. Let's try Robert. Robert, go ahead.
This is Rob Larson. Yeah, I am kind of a little bit shocked. I don't see some of the systems that I thought that we were going to get some opportunity on. And I was wondering if you could go into some of those, James. I know the Skookumchuck was one of the ones that we had lengthy discussions about. And I know that we thought we could craft a fishery that would impact less than the allowable number, I think 8 steelhead on that system. Can you tell us why that isn't here?
Yeah, Rob, really good question. When I talked about optimism this season, one of those points of optimism was these creative proposals we heard from folks to craft hatchery focused fisheries around hatchery steelhead. So those are gonna pick up. I don't need to tell you, Rob, but so everybody, is thinking along the same lines. Those are gonna pick up in late December, early January, those hatchery steelhead focused fisheries. And our intent was to design heavily monitored fisheries. Specifically, we were talking about Wynoochee and Skookumchuck. We heard from our tribal co-managers extremely clearly that in the Chehalis and the hump tulips, there was an interest in maximum protection, maximum conservation concern. This is consistent with the last couple of years, as you know. The only sort of discussion that left that maximum protection idea, if we're just for full transparency, was some data collection. The tribe had interest in March in collecting scales from wild steelhead that would have resulted in some mortalities. So we did hear that from the tribe, but otherwise the discussion was really focused around protecting Chehalis River steelhead. So we thought that this first 2 weeks in Chehalis, we heard from folks loud and clear that it was really important for these coho fisheries. So we really saw it with co-managers, a fishery that we could provide this maximum protection for wild steelhead, but try to get some more opportunity on those hatchery coho. And that was something we've heard for years now. So what we've done is we've shifted our creel effort toward these two systems in these two areas. I guess the Chehalis is comprised of these three areas to try to understand what steelhead impacts would be in December. So I know this isn't what you want to hear. I think many of us were disappointed by this. I do want to let you know that the creel effort we're going to conduct these first 2 weeks in December is not going to be lost. It's not for nothing. Of course, there's going to be a bunch of hatchery coho harvested. That's the hope. But there's also going to be some data collected on the Chehalis during a time period when we just don't have it. So we hope to demonstrate what steelhead encounters really are during these first 2 weeks and build on that. So that's the idea.
Well, I'm kind of speechless because I thought we made it really clear that there was opportunity and that we could craft a fishery that would allow us to harvest those 3,000 plus fish that were like in the Skookumchuck River. And to say I'm disappointed is, unless I misunderstood you, but is that going to open after the first of the year? Did I misunderstand you, or is it not opening period this year?
No, I think you're, there's nothing to read between the lines here. The Chehalis is expected to close December 16th. And again, I think the best way to describe this, Rob, I'm sensitive to the disappointment. We worked really hard for that. A lot of hours calculating those fisheries. But I think it's just a reminder that, we're in this with tribal co-managers, and we're coming up with fishery proposals on a run that last year was 3,000 fish below the escapement goal. So just a lot of concern and a lot of concepts from the Quinault Indian Nation in the Chehalis around conservation and protection. So I don't think there's a lot more to say there. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. So that's where we're at in the Chehalis.
So the department chose to do that, even though we could have executed a fishery based on the percentage of fish that we could have allowed, and we just are choosing not to. That's what you and Kelly have chosen to do. Is that what I'm understanding?
No, Rob, I'm going to make sure we have time for other people's questions because, I want to make sure that we're understanding what we're saying from the state's perspective and what we're not saying.
Okay.
So we didn't choose this, right? We manage the Chehalis tribe, the Chehalis River with the Chehalis tribe, the Quinault Indian Nation, and the state, right? So we have lots of good ideas every year when we sit down at the table. The goal is to have a agreed to management plan, and we have that in the Chehalis River. Best case scenario, these fisheries that we think are technically defensible this year would have been in place. Those were proposed. I think we look toward next year and say, how do we make these arguments even better? And we also know that wild steelhead will benefit, from this added protection. So this was a co-manager agreed to fishery in the Chehalis. And I don't think saying that we chose not to do this is accurate. So.
Okay. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Robert. Our next hand is from Ty. Ty, go ahead.
Good evening, guys. Thanks for the last town hall here. I have a question if there's any kind of leniency, especially in the Willapa, concerning the dates for no fishing from a boat and bait, even if it could stay barbless. Considering the number of coho in, especially the nacelle system and the limited amount of access, could it even be fishing from a boat below Highway 4, above the bridge, above the hatchery, or bait until like December 31st? Is there some kind of leniency? I mean, you're looking at a monster coho run with over 30,000 fish returned to the hatchery.
Yeah, thanks, Ty. At this point, there's not, you know, a new analysis we're doing on that because, and the reason I'm saying that is because we've already looked into that. So Willapa is one of these systems that we're chronically not meeting escapement. It's a place where we don't have a history of creel or sport fish monitoring. So the idea that we're implementing a fishery without those tools in place, you know, already provides some risk in the Willapa system. So the goal here, as we kind of described in previous town halls, is to spread that risk across the run, not disproportionately affect fish in December, January. So we have these conservative regulations that the intent is to protect for a long season, fish all the way through the end of March. You know, considering the fact that, you know, these are conservative regulations and there's some opportunity lost with that no fishing from a boat rule, but I appreciate the proposal. I do. And yeah, we've looked hard into it and we're not there in terms of the number of wild fish and the monitoring that we have available for Willapa Bay.
All right, thank you. I guess I'm a little confused since the commercial fishery is still going on, but thanks again for your time and you guys have a good evening.
Thank you. And our next hand is from Lisa. Lisa, go ahead.
Hi, guys. My name is Trevor. I'm on Lisa's computer, but I just want to say thank you. Pretty stoked with the result as far as the Forks area, being from there, and really appreciate what you guys have done here as far as opening up a season, which I think was the most important thing, and also appeasing some folks who want to fish out of some boats and making sure that we're letting all these fish go and whatnot. And I think first and foremost, that should be our biggest concern is just making sure we get as many fish to spawning bed as we can, and then also trying to get a fishing season so we can actually get some real data throughout the season. Because I felt like when we closed last year, we missed a big opportunity to see what kind of March was going to do. And just looking at the last couple of years, it just kind of seems that we're probably never going to get April back, are we? And with that being said, if sport fishing isn't going to be allowed in April ever again, are you guys going to put up the commercial fishing stuff that's going to be happening in April? So in my mind, like if we're trying to protect that kind of window of the fishing season, it would seem that given the river a rest during the month of April for steelhead, it'd kind of be the best way to bring those fish back in that time frame versus doing a sport fishing season and a gillnet season, for example. So I'm just wondering kind of what the thinking is as far as having a commercial opener through the month of April, when I think that's kind of supposed to be geared towards salmon, right? So I'm surprised why it's not later. Just wondering if you guys could answer that. Yeah, Trevor, thanks. I appreciate, the positive thoughts there on these fisheries. I just want to mention the Olympic National Park has switched their regulations in these rivers we're talking about here to a permanent closure March 31. So that is a permanent rule in the national park. So I'm not speaking for them, but I do know that regulation is in effect. We don't have plans of doing that right now.
these are emergency regulations. That said, we have explored more and more what is the saving, and we've had folks from the public help us with this, anglers really dig into what's the savings associated with April. And if we ever get it back, what's the impact associated with that? So we're thinking about it in terms of commercial fisheries. So everybody's on the same page. These are tribal fisheries. We don't have commercial fisheries on the Washington coast, of course, associated with, state managed fisheries. But the point is still there, right, Trevor, that commercial fisheries taking place in April, they do have an impact on steelhead, both kelts and spawners. So it's a concern of ours. For now, what we know, and I think there's some comfort in the management plans that are agreed to or extremely close to signed in the Quileute and the Hoe, those total impacts on wild steelhead include the impacts associated with salmon fisheries in April. So the commercial fisheries in April are really limited this year for both the Hoe and the Quileute. Bottom line, though, those impacts are accounted for. So they're called salmon fisheries, but we're counting the number of dead steelhead. So anyway, it's a great topic. We're thinking hard about what April means to us, but no plans on a permanent closure at this time.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm just worried about the March kelts that are ripping out, and then also the incoming April fish. And I know we've talked about mesh size on gill nets and whatnot, but I would argue that we have plenty of steelhead that come up these systems. They're as bigger than a lot of these springers, so I find that to be interesting. But main thing is I just want steelhead to make it, and for us to keep being able to have these conversations. And again, I thank you guys for what you're doing.
Thanks, Trevor.
Okay, and our next hand is from Gabe. Gabe, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate the opportunity. How many impacts are we modeling for the recreational fishery in the 16 days it'll be open in the Chehalis? And how many impacts is the treaty fishery model to use in their 6-day fishery?
Yeah, thanks. Gabe, so the Chehalis is a bit of a black box for us because of the lack of monitoring in this system. But by all measures, and I'm going to let Mike jump in if he wants here too. The tribal fishery in both of these systems is expected to encounter 5 or less wild steelhead. And again, Mike, I'm going to flag you here to make sure I'm saying this right. And then the state fishery in the same place, 5 or less wild steelhead expected to be countered during that first 2 weeks of December.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Gabe.
And our next hand is from caller ending in 080. Go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. Like a gentleman, a couple calls ago, I also just wanted to express my extreme disappointment in the decision on the Skookumchuck and some of those tributaries. The town hall meeting number 2 was almost a large portion of it was all these numbers the agency had on these tributaries and how many fish we could go catch and how much data you guys needed, and this would help you guys get that needed data. And you're basically telling us now, oh, sorry, another interest group said we want this shut. So the recreational fishermen, which was already getting a small slice, which we had a whole town hall dedicated to, sorry, it's just done, it's over with. I'm sorry, I'm just extremely frustrated. I've listened to all these town halls. I participated last time, and it all just seems like at the end of the day, you guys are just, it seems to be a show. I don't understand it. If you guys really need that data, you've just guaranteed you're not going to get that data. And next year when we go through this, you guys are probably going to be saying the same things. Well, we don't know how many hatchery fish versus wild are actually caught in the Skookumchuck because we don't have the data. But you guys are guaranteeing you don't have the data. So I appreciate you putting these on. I appreciate you giving the public a chance to talk and propose. But at the end of the day, it doesn't seem like it's for anything. It just kind of seems like a show. So I'm sure you can tell I'm frustrated. I'm sure a lot of people are. So thank you for taking my comment.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts. Just a reminder to folks, I want to make it really clear that all of these fisheries that we see on the board here that are open, with the exception of Willapa, we seek co-manager agreement on these. So when we're not talking about interest groups, I just want to make sure we're all clear. When we're proposing fisheries in the town hall, there's a really important step that comes next, and these are discussions with tribal co-managers. So just make sure to reiterate that. But thanks again for the feedback.
Okay, our next hand is from caller ending in 606. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I was curious about the Ho River. You guys didn't touch base on there at all, whether we're going to be able to fish from boats from that system or not. And also, I was curious if, once again, with all these other rivers closing early, if like perhaps maybe we would put maybe some sonars in to be able to count some fish and that sort of stuff. You know, I feel like we need to be more proactive, not reactive. You know, like Edward Deming said, you know, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. So I really think we need to get data on these things. So I was curious if, you know, that might be an option in the future.
Yeah, thanks. Really great comments. We agree with you. Everyone on our team should be nodding their head right now that there's this lack of data. We've got proposals out there to acquire that funding that we need to do that work, to improve the tools that we have available. That includes sonar. So this is stuff we put pen to paper. We're moving these proposals onto the legislature to seek funding. So that's high on our list. In terms of the Ho River, I might have gone a little bit fast through that, so I apologize if you missed it. The Ho River is the same regulation as last season. So no fishing from a floating device, selective gear rules, release wild rainbow trout, and 2 hatchery steelhead bag limit. So again, that's the same rule from last season. And then a treaty fishery expected for 18 days.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Our next hand is from Brian. Brian, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thanks. Hey, I want to thank you, James and Kelly and your rest of your team for having this this series of town halls. It's always very informative. I got one comment and then one question. You know, my comment would just echo what others have said. I'm very disappointed that you weren't able to design with the co-managers some type of fisheries on the Chehalis tributaries for those hatchery fish. I know you've got to work with co-managers and that's just the way the world works, but I think it's very disappointing that it wasn't able to work out. My question shifts to the Queets River. And I'm wondering if you've had any discussions with the National Park Service. I think it was 2 years ago. I'm not sure about last year if I can remember right, but they opened up a fishery just, you know, a little bit above and below the Salmon River just during the hatchery return period there. And I think that might be a good opportunity to harvest hatchery fish that are headed up the Salmon River without too many impacts at all overall on the Queets and Clearwater. But I'm wondering if you've had any discussions with them and if you've offered them any recommendations from your agency's point of view.
Yeah, thanks. So in the Queets, the fishery you're describing is one we've thought hard about. Extremely low impact on wild steelhead to encounter what could be a high abundance of hatchery steelhead. So it's on our mind. I can't speak for the Olympic National Park, but I know that they're thinking about proposals right now at the same time we are. But they're weighing the same things that we are. If there's fisheries taking place in the Queets that we're extremely uncomfortable with, are these fisheries we want to take part in? So I'm specifically, talking about the bullet here. Brian, I think you can maybe see it. We have treaty fisheries there and co-manager agreements that we're really seeking and having discussions there. And we want to make sure if we implement a sport fishery in a river like the Queets, chronically under escaped, far below averages, or in some cases, some years in recent years, lower than has ever been recorded. We want to make sure we get these fisheries right with our co-managers, and we're just not to that point yet. So it's on the board. I know that Olympic National Park's thinking about that hatchery focused fishery, but we're really worried about the entire system. So trying to weigh the benefits and risk of a fishery like that.
All righty, thanks for answering my question.
Thanks.
Our next hand is from Jason. Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So I have a couple questions. I got in here late. I didn't really hear much about the Wainuchi and stuff like that. Being a local boy from Grace Harbor for 19 years and watching my grandpa fish that river, who lives right on that river. Back in the day, he used to be able to go to work. He used to work at DOC, go to work. Before he'd go to work, catch his 2 fish. Are we ever going to be able to fish that river again on a normal schedule of winter run?
Yeah, that's our hope. I mean, thanks to number one, Jason. Thanks for joining us here. I don't think we've met, but I appreciate you jumping in here. The idea of folks giving up traditions of fishing these rivers, it's not something we're interested in at all. Bums us out too. So I appreciate the passion and your thoughts there. The intent is to get back to fishing. We did some really hard work this year, technical work to defend fisheries in places like the Wainuchi and Skookumchuck. Even when we're extremely low in terms of wild fish, we're going to continue that work, continue those discussions with co-managers. Ideally, wild steelhead numbers begin to increase. We can look at rivers like the Quileute this year, where we have a forecast that's higher than the past couple. Quinault is in a similar situation. So we want to see rivers like the Chehalis build as well. So we're doing that work. That said, if we see these low returns in subsequent years, we're going to depend really heavily on this sport fish monitoring. That's what's going to get us these proposals with tribal co-managers that cross the finish line. And so we're going to keep hiring these monitoring staff, keep seeking the money. And so when we've got, these hatchery focused fisheries with 5 or 6 wild steelhead impacts, and we got to stay below these super small margins of error, we think technically we can still design those fisheries. So I can't promise next year we're going to be out there, but I can promise you we're going to be here doing that work, trying to defend those fisheries. So
that leads me to my next. That leads me to my next. Sorry about that. That leads me to my next question. So as of right now, we have no fish around the Wainuchi. Is there a chance of it this year at all?
No, I mean, right now we have co-manager agreed to plans moving forward that close both of those systems December 1.
Yeah, it's a real, like everybody else is saying, it's a real disappointment. I know. I mean, you guys got to do what you guys got to do, but I mean, it's a sad disappointment to me and the guys that I know that are out guiding, and it's their livelihood. It's kind of how we were talking about you guys, not even just going off subject for a little bit, is commercial tuna fish, and our prices have dropped. Commercial crab and our prices are dropped. It's like our whole fishery industry is just tanking. I mean, sturgeon, look at sturgeon. I mean, I know of a couple people who are caught twitching jigs this year on the Chehalis who are catching sturgeon. Like all of our fisheries are just going out the window, it seems like.
Thanks, Jason.
So, yep. Thank you guys.
Our next hand is from the Salmon Ninja. Go ahead. I can see you're unmuted, but we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, so my question is about the Salmon River and like the Queet system. I see that the treaty fishery, they're planning on commercially fishing at 36 days. and we're having no season for recreational guys at all. And that on the Ho River, they're only fishing 18 days, but we're having 4 months fishing there. So I feel like they know there's a lot of hatchery fish that are going to be coming in there if they're going to fish it for 36 days. So why don't we get our shot at them and our fair share?
Yeah, thanks. I didn't catch your name, but yeah, appreciate you calling in here. So we answered this question earlier. I don't mind, reiterating the message. We're looking for a co-manager agreed to plan that protects the resource. So there's hatchery directed fisheries in the Queets and the Clearwater we're really interested in. There's an extremely small margin of error, like I mentioned in other systems here too in the Queets, not very many wild fish to deal with. So we need to have fisheries that can get at those hatchery fish while protecting the wild. We haven't seen a plan like that, a fishery that we can get behind in terms of co-management agreements. So we're uncomfortable with the take associated with the Queets fishery run by the Quinault Indian Nation. And we just want to make sure that when we're signing up for a fishery, it's one, that's going to meet our conservation goals. We haven't gotten there yet on the Queets. That said, we're working hard. We're in communication with Quinault Indian Nation. We hope to get there. So I'm hoping on both the Quinault and the Queets, folks can just watch that work happen and look for updates if we're successful there.
So you guys saying that there is a chance that this year there will be a season there?
Well, right now we're planning on a closure December 1. I just want to be really clear about that. That's the most likely thing you're going to see here in coming days. But the director, Sue Swin, the director of the fish program, Cunningham, and myself are all in communication with the Quinault and trying to get that work done as soon as we can. But the expectation should be a closure December 1. I don't want to sugarcoat it and just be really honest here.
Gotcha. So even if they do go ahead and fish those 36 days commercially, we're just not getting our percentage of the fish at all.
Yeah, as I see it right now, we've heard from the tribe and seen proposals, fisheries cut that describe fisheries 36 days, that we're uncomfortable with. So yeah, I don't know another way to describe it. I think we're speaking the same language here.
Okay. Gotcha. That's a real bummer and a super disappointment just because, in the full month of December, even into about halfway through January, the wild fishing counter is extremely low. That's just super disappointing.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I just wanted to remind folks, we only have about 7 minutes left and we still have a lot of hands. So we're going to get through as many as possible tonight. Our next hand is from Bob. Bob, go ahead.
Hey, James. Hey, Kelly. Thank you much for all your guys' work and really appreciate it. I had a couple comments or questions. I actually thanks so much for the stuff on the Quileute and the Ho. I did have a question on the Quileute system, James. We expanded the boat fishing stuff. Are we still allowed to fish not from our boat above those zones? So like above Maxfield on the Solduck, above 101 on the Kalawa, above the hatchery on the Bogoshiel, we're still be able to allow out there to fish, just can't fish from our boats, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I want to make sure Jenny's listening in because, she's crafted these, or sort of taken proposals that we've heard from folks and crafted these fisheries. But yeah, so I want to be clear, the no fishing from a floating device rule doesn't mean you can't float these sections in your boat and get out of the water. And that's the case in those systems you just named, Bob.
I just wanted to clarify they are still open for us to fish, just can't from our boat, correct?
Yeah, Jenny, do you want to
Okay.
add anything here?
No, I think that's the answer to that question. You can fish in all the usual areas. It's where you can fish from a boat is restricted to below Maxfield on the Solduck, below the mouth of Mill Creek on the Bogoshiel. And the mouth of Mill Creek is just above the hatchery, not just below. I just wanted to put that little correction in there. And below 101 on the Kalawa, as well as on the Quileute. but you can fish from the shore up to by the Clahowya campground on the Solduck.
Correct. Okay. So that was the other correction was Mill Creek. So Mill Creek is like, it's probably a good half a mile.
Yeah, about
Or
three
better,
quarters, half to 3/4 of a mile above. I think it's a good boundary, both because there are hatchery fish caught up there above the hatchery. And it was a boundary, I think, that was proposed in one of our meetings as well.
Okay. Are we going to put signage there for the people that don't familiar with Mill Creek? Because a lot of people aren't going to know where that's at.
I think I could put in the regulations that it is about a half mile above the hatchery, just so that people are clear where that is.
Okay.
That-
Okay.
That might help.
And
Yeah,
Bob,
yep.
thank you, Jenny. I really appreciate that. And yeah, sorry for the typo there. Bob, when we just had early closures because of the low flow associated with coho, we had a bit of confusion about where you can and can't fish. We had enforcement and biology staff out there posting signage. It was a huge help, and I think an eye-opener to us about how a little bit of signage can go a long way as long as we have the resources to pick it up when those fisheries reopen. So I made a note there. It sounds like a place maybe signage is a good idea, so let's keep in touch on that.
Yeah, no problem at all. I just think it would be a good spot because, like I say, a lot of people aren't going to know where Mill Creek is because there are several creeks above and below where Mill Creek is that could be construed as, hey, that's a Mill Creek. Well, no, it's not actually. So I think some signage would be good. So other than that, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Thanks, Bob.
Our next hand is from Larry. Larry, go ahead.
Hi, once again, I'd like to thank James and his staff for all your hard work. Question and the comment. Question first has to do with no boats above Maxfield. It seems like all that does is double the pressure from Maxfield down, versus if you say went from the hatchery down, it'd be the same amount of pressure. So I don't quite understand that. Maybe you can illuminate us on that a little bit more. And then regardless of the Queets, understanding you're still working with the tribe, Zero Sports, 50% of zero is zero for the tribe, isn't it? And what am I missing? I don't know. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, for the Quileute system, I thought we'd be talking a lot about the Quileute because there's all these little nuances, and the proposals we heard from people on the Quileute system were extremely broad. Some folks noticed that the Solduck has been lofting up the total escapement, and kind of disproportionate escapement has come from the Solduck. It's been performing really well and wanted maximum protection for that system because it's so important. Other folks thought that because it was doing so well, we should probably expand all the way up on the Solduck. On the other side of the system in the Bogashiel, we know that that system has not been performing well. So again, we heard proposals focused on those hatchery fish that were wide open all the way to full closures of the Bogashiel. The other nuance here is we have systems, neighboring systems, like the Hoe, that are still no fishing from a boat. So there's questions about shifting effort. So a lot of moving pieces here. So Jenny and the team found, I think, what was a balance among all those proposals to provide the protection we need to meet management objectives with high confidence, really, really hoping to get this fishery, and all intentions are to move all the way through March 31. Last year, we had a really disappointing early closure. So we think that this boundary provides the protection for the Solduck, this real stronghold of the Quileute right now, without putting, excessive risk on it, but also protects the Bogashiel. And that Solduck boat fishing opportunity is extremely important to folks. So we want to make sure there was an opportunity to get out there. So anyway, this was the balance, Larry. And it probably could have been crafted a couple different ways based on the proposals we heard. But I'm really happy with the way the team figured this one out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And our next hand is from Dwayne. Dwayne, go ahead.
Hey, James. Hey, Kelly. Appreciate you guys' effort this evening. I know your days are long and lots of work goes in, so, credit to your staff. James, my passion is Grays Harbor. We've had discussions on Sats up Wainuchi, Skookumchuck. Some of the points have already been made. I'd like to drill down a little tighter on some of those numbers. Thankfully, you posted in virtual meeting 2. And I may be wrong, Mike can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the impact on the SATs would have been 58 or 59, 37 on the Wainuchi. I'm going off of memory here. So for example, on the SATSA, that would be an encounter rate on wild fish of 580 or 590 fish with a mortality of 10%. Do we honestly believe we're going to exceed that in a 2-week fishery in December, when the reality of wild fish entering into that system is more of a February, March? I guess, as stated, you don't really have the data. That's been made clear. We don't have the data on these tributaries. We don't know the exact run timings. But how do we ever get there? How do we acquire the data if we continue to not fish? And so last year, the discussion sounded very similar. We don't have the data. We don't have the staff, the creel sampling to ensure that we're collecting good data, because, bad data is no good, but good data is great. So I also back up to last year out of legislative session, WDFW, landed pretty well or favorably in some areas, i.e. creel sampling and saltwater fisheries and a few other terminal areas. Did you guys actually go, in strong asking for monies also allocated for these coastal fisheries, these terminal coastal fisheries for recreation? Looking ahead, understanding that without creel sampling and having boots on the ground, we cannot acquire the data. And if the recreational community cannot help you or assist you in acquiring the data by you guys funding or finding, funding through legislation, what's the future hold? So if we don't fish this year, we don't have data for next year. Are we seeking funding for those boots on the ground for the future? Because it just seems like we're on a hamster wheel here and it's repetitive. I know you guys are working hard. I appreciate that, but I just hate seeing us repeat ourselves with, lost opportunity on the Wainuchi. Why are we putting all these hatchery fish in if we cannot even fish for them? Obviously frustrating for us, frustrating for you. Skookumchuck, that point's been made. Just looking forward to say, are we seeking funding to get those boots on the ground? Can we as a recreation community help you obtain the data that we need to move forward, so you have the ammunition to sit down at the table with the co-managers and make sense of this whole thing? That's all I have.
Hey, James, mind if I take an initial stab at this?
Yeah.
So Dwayne, good to hear from you. Thanks for being here tonight. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate the question around funding. We've been talking about a lack of resources for these fisheries, monitoring these fisheries for a long time. And you're right, we did get quite a bit of money out of the last legislative session. Most of it was provisoed, and the vast majority of those provisos were focused on salmon fisheries, primarily Puget Sound. That being said, we did get a homework assignment from the legislature, and I think a few of the folks who were on the call tonight helped us with the coastal steelhead proviso that came out of that last session before last. And what that asked us, well, it asked us to do a number of things, but the thing that I'm most excited about is it asked us to put together a funding package that would get at virtually all of the questions that we have around coastal steelhead. We've talked about sonar tonight. We've talked about limited creel. We've talked about this for, like I said, the last 3 years at least. So this proviso is going to be submitted to this proviso homework's going to be submitted to the legislature here the first week of December. it includes about just, I think it's, and Toby will correct me if I'm wrong, just under a $6 million biennial request that would be, if we get, if we have our way, will be fully funded and will be ongoing money that will provide some much needed help regarding all of the uncertainty we've had and that you've heard about over the last few years with respect to what these fish are doing and where they're doing it. So your next question is, how can you help? Boy, if you can go on our website, take a peek at the Coastal Steelhead Proviso Implementation Plan, you'll see where we intend to put that money, and you can engage in the legislative process. And the building just turned off my lights, so I'm going to turn it over to you, James, and go turn my lights back on.
Yeah, thanks. I don't have anything to add there, Dwayne, but I do appreciate you being here and the feedback. Yeah, let's keep talking.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I appreciate it. You know, I think speaking for most people attending tonight, one of the outlying fears is that we continue to put hatchery fish in. We have no opportunity to go after those hatchery fish. It gives great fodder for those who are against hatchery programs and ammunition to come at you with lawsuits and other, you know, litigations to say, you're not going after those fish to harvest, so why are you even putting them in the river? And I think, speaking for our behalf on the recreation community, that is a, you know, a genuine fear that we're going to lose hatchery programs if we are not allowed to go harvest them. So if it's funding, you know, if we can secure the funding, and I like the provisional programs that Kelly spoke of, the future may hold opportunity for us to fish, assist with sampling, and get you guys the numbers you need, because obviously we're losing the battle as we move forward right now. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Dwayne. Appreciate it.
And James, sorry, James, it is 7:07, so it is up to you.
Hey, Leah, I would suggest we go another half an hour. I see we got I think I'm correct. I see a dozen more hands. Let's go another half hour and we'll shut it down at, well, let's go till 7:30. How about that?
Okay, that sounds great. And our next hand is from Steppen. Go ahead.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi. First and foremost, I want to thank you guys as well, because I know that each of you guys is stepping into, you know, havoc. You guys are stepping into a job where fisheries are already in trouble and you're trying to get in there and fix it with your hands tied behind your back. You know, it's a co-managed resource. I understand how difficult that is for you guys, and my heart goes out to you on that. I want you to know that James and I, we've talked personally on the phone, so we know each other already. He knows that I am a fishing guide in the Grace Harbor area. I didn't hear anybody else speak for guides, so I kind of like to speak up for them, if that's okay. So first, I see the December 1st through the 16th, and I see we have Steelhead opportunity on there. I know you guys fought to do that. So let me say I appreciate that. However, I do have a concern. With that Steelhead opportunity being on there and the tribes having a 6-day window, when does the tribe plan on fishing? Are they going to be fishing in the lower estuary area in January, or are they going to be fishing around the same time frame? Because personally, if they're not fishing within the same time frame, I'd rather see it closed. And I know guys are going to be mad at me for saying that because they want to target those sats of fish, those coho to be exact. I would rather see it closed if they're going to try to gill net. I don't want to see any gill nets in the Chehalis River for steelhead. Personally, I know that's not ever going to happen, probably being a co-managed resource, but it's a sport fish. We can't keep gill netting for these fish and expect them to recover. And I think that's why you guys are managing the way that you are, is that we can't recover these fish. We can't allow a certain amount of opportunity because we can't have gill nets in the rivers to recover. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the last part about gill nets, I just want to sort of back up to, I think the focus of your topic was, when is the tribe fishing in the Chehalis? So this one we can answer. The discussion around how we protect wild steelhead, you know, about 1,000 fish below the goal before anyone goes fishing with the Quinault Indian Nation. How do we do this and have a fishery? So in good faith, we discussed and agreed on this December 1 through 16th for both parties. So the tribe's fishery is scheduled for 3 days, the first 2 weeks of December, and then fully closed. So both of the state and the tribal fishery will be heavily monitored, and we'll share impacts associated with steelhead, and then we'll be out of the water December 16th.
Okay, copy that. Well, then I agree with fishing on the Satsip, so nobody be mad at me. Anyway, so I have another question. Sorry, I gotta kind of go through my notes here really quick. I apologize. So one thing I kind of want to really touch on, and this is just a general for the state. I'm from the Puget Sound area, and so I've seen rivers like the Carbon River, the Puyallup, the Green River. The list goes on. These rivers close, and it starts with, we're going to limit what time we fish, and then we're going to limit how we fish, and then it's all out closure. And I feel like that's like the status quo, that we just keep managing to closures, and then there's no plan, or at least it's not presented to the public that there's a plan that we have in place, that we're gonna go into the Carbon River, per se, and we're gonna recover that, where we're gonna watch that run, potentially to give you guys opportunity again, even at a catch and release fishery. We don't know if those fish are in there. And so I think it's important that the state and whoever, legislatures, understands we need to get money allocated for sonars in those areas too. We need to be counting these steelhead. And I understand that it's not just put the sonars in and everything's fine and dandy, but we need to put them in, and we need to have boots on the ground. We need to do everything. You guys already know that. But in my last question or statement would be, we would donate. I mean, we've got people that would weld up the bracketry, everything you guys need for your sonars. We've got guys that would donate their time. If we're not fishing, if I'm not guiding, I would donate every day that I can to you guys to help you guys and volunteer. Is there a way for us to allocate our money directly to you guys for these programs and make sure that that money doesn't go into the general fund?
Yeah, thanks. There was a lot in there. I just want to highlight that if this funding that Kelly talked about is, if we're successful achieving that funding, we're going to be expanding this coastal steelhead work relatively rapidly, and we're going to be looking for help. So there's going to be opportunities for us all to rally around and say, okay, what's the highest priority thing, and what can we get out the door the fastest? So I think we need to keep talking. Also, Steve, you mentioned the Carbon River. I'm trying desperately not to take the bait. I cut my teeth on the Carbon for about 5 or 6 years. So it'd be nice to chat more about that on the side. But I'm gonna try not to go that direction tonight.
Or it was more aimed at monitoring those systems for future reopeners, or just to see where we're at. Where are we at? How many fish do we got? Do we know? I know that you guys do have data, and I appreciate the boots on the ground. I will say that, but we need to get on this sonar train, and we need to really use the technology that we have. And I know you guys are fighting for it. I appreciate it. I'm so happy you guys are talking about it. There's a lot of stuff tonight that gives me a lot of hope. So I want you guys to know I appreciate the hard work, and we're willing to do the hard work with you guys. We really are. There's a lot of guys that gave up, but there's a lot of us that have not gave up. And we're here with you guys. We love these fish. We love the places they live, and we don't want to give this up ever.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Our next hand is from Jacob. Jacob, go ahead.
Hi there, James. Fishing guide down here from the Oregon coast. Just really quick question about your guys' mortality rate. Just because we do our broodstock programs here, and we use barbs, we use bait, treble hooks, we transport these fish, we live spawn them, and then we transport them back to the river, and we have a 2% mortality rate at the highest. I'm just really curious to hear how you guys have a 10% mortality rate on barbless, no bait, and very minimal handling upon these fish in your guys' area.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. Appreciate your insight from Oregon and that broodstock work. There's a variety of places where we've seen that too, specifically around hatchery fish where they're extremely sturdy with handling like that. The truth is, the release mortality is extremely uncertain across the coastal region, across the state. It's probably different for summer versus winter steelhead, lower river fisheries where fish are chrome bright, upper river, late season where they've been on the spawning ground. So a lot of uncertainty, a lot of variability. Definite need to try to understand river by river what is release mortality. Right now, 10% is consistent with most places in the state, most places in the Columbia River. So on this call, I will say we won't be able to change that 10%. That's what we're moving into this season using it. The good news is, so there's room for work. The funding initiative that Kelly talked about includes specific research, trying to understand what are specific release mortality rates. I will say, so it's a good point. All that said, good point. We don't know all there is to know about release mortality, but I will say the fisheries that are limited this season, it's likely not a result of a 10% release mortality versus a 5% release mortality. We're managing down to these individual fish, but the big unknown for us right now, highest priority, is encounter rate. If we put a fishery in place, how many fish are we encountering? And I think it's similar to some things Dwayne England talked about and maybe others. So a lot of uncertainty here. That is one of them. So thanks for flagging it.
Yeah, no problem. It'd be great to have you guys work along with how our impacts are along with that fishery, just because we do have such a high encounter rate and handling rate with those fish. It would be great to see that head up your guys' way and kind of help with those numbers and impacts.
Yeah, good points. Thanks.
Thank you.
Our next hand is from David. David, go ahead.
Hey, everybody, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, perfect. Thank you. I'm going to represent maybe an unpopular point of view, but a relevant one, which is the out-of-state tourist fishery. And I'm specifically looking at wild steelhead in my tourism, right? And just one comment. I mean, I think everyone's doing a great job. James, Kelly, you're in a tough situation. You've got multiple points of view on everything. But specifically on the Solduck River, my understanding is that it's supposed to be managed as a wild steelhead management zone. But I feel like the regulations for that river are being lumped into the overall Quilote system. And I feel like maybe that river should be potentially more conservative based on that management designation. What do you think about that?
Yeah, appreciate the feedback. We heard proposals to have a full closure of the Solduck to protect it. And like I mentioned, ones that were opposite, like liberalize it back to the pamphlet. So we were seeking a balance there, strong interest in protecting the wild steelhead gene bank there, but confident that the fishery we have in place now, given our estimates of encounters, we're well within the thresholds. We're hoping that forecast comes in like it did last year, where it's extremely accurate. Still some uncertainty, but I think we're in a good place there on the Solduck, David.
Okay, great. My last comment is, regardless of fishing from a vessel or not, I'm still coming out there to fish as a tourist. And I really do appreciate all the effort that you guys are putting in. So I'm looking forward to this season coming up.
Hey, James, maybe if I could just say one thing with respect to the wild steelhead management zones, David, just to be clear, a wild steelhead management zone designation doesn't mean there's no fishing on those populations. What it means is there's no hatchery influence. So I just want to be clear and make sure everybody's on the same page with what wild steelhead management zone means and what it doesn't mean.
Okay, Kelly, fair enough. Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next hand is from caller ending in 311. Go ahead. I have requested you to unmute.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hey, this is Kyle, local guy out of Grays Harbor. I think a lot of the things that I wanted to talk about were kind of touched tonight, but you know, just squeaky wheel has to get greased eventually, and just the sonar. I mean, I think that's really the direction. You know, the boots on the ground. I appreciate everything you guys are doing, but you know, you got guys that are counting these rivers and stuff like that, and you know, the reds are going to change every year. They're not always going to be in the same areas. Generally, certain stretches are going to see more than not, but you know, human error compared to the system, like Stefan was saying earlier, is we're willing to dedicate so much time to try to really help see what's out there, get the data, just be able to help you guys get the information you need to help these fisheries and help us sports guys get on the fisheries. And it's just more a comment, not so much question. A lot of questions were answered tonight, and you know, it looks like we're potentially going in some good direction, especially with funding. But I mean, we'll dedicate so much time to helping get the numbers counted and understanding that what data we need to be able to co-manage the system. And I understand where you guys are at on the cleats as well. As you know, it's just, it wasn't fun to hear what they wanted to do on that system. So I understand where you guys are at, but I'm also with the other guys. 50s. So I just kind of wanted to get my comments in. I do appreciate everything you guys are doing. You're getting us a fishery this year, short fishery. I'm pretty disappointed with Grays Harbor, but together somehow. So thanks for the work you guys are putting in, and you know, giving us somewhat of a fishery along the coastline and everything like that. But the being able to put out the resources too, if there's anything that any young sports angler that wants to be a part of the guys fighting for this can click on a link and see how they can actually dedicate some of their time and volunteer. You know, more stuff you guys can put out on social media, Facebook. I mean, Stacey Kelly used to be awesome in reporting all the different changes on Facebook. You could see and expect updates from her all the time. You know, anything you guys can put out to try to even get the younger guys involved, where, you know, volunteering could really help change and get the data. So that's just my 2 cents. I appreciate you guys, and we'll continue to work together.
Thanks for the support.
James, just to let you know, we're seeing a couple requests to put back up the slide regulations, the regulation slide, sorry. If you want to do that while we go to the next question.
And then, Lee, if I can, we got 7 minutes left, so please be brief. Want to get through as many folks as possible. If we don't get to you, you know how to get a hold of us. But we will need to end at 7:30.
And our next phone call, or sorry, our next hand is from a phone call ending in 311. Go ahead. And I have requested you to unmute. You might see here a pop-up. Okay, you're unmuted. We can hear you. Okay, we are going to go to the next caller, and maybe we'll go back to you if you have another little bit of time. Our next hand is from Thomas. Go ahead.
Hey, I mostly have a comment more than questions. You guys have been great at fielding everything so far, and most of the things I was going to question you've answered. So it's more of a comment, and you know, I have a great concern about our lack of opportunity on hatchery fish. And I'm fearful that if we're not able to harvest them, that will give incentive to shut them down. And we already have had great rejections in hatchery production, which have not shown any positive correlation to wild returns. And I'm concerned that if we continue to lose opportunity to target hatchery fish, then the hatchery fish production is also going to diminish and go away. And once it's gone, those fish are gone. Of course, we want broodstock programs, and we want to increase broodstock programs, but we need abundant wild fish to cull from to do that. And so I have a lot of concern about losing opportunity to fish for hatchery fish. And I really don't understand why we can't. It doesn't make any sense to me at all that some of our terminal fisheries where we would have a minuscule impact on hatchery fish, we're not allowed to fish. I mean, I understand that the Queets and Clearwater system is got way too many net days, and there's nothing that the department has clout to stop. But our impact would still be so minimal on wild fish for a targeted fishery around the mouth of the salmon and on the Salmon River itself. And it doesn't add up to me. It really doesn't add up. I know you're doing the best to protect wild fish, but I'm afraid that we're going to lose hatchery fish, and when we lose hatchery fish, we're also going to put the wild fish in more jeopardy because they're not going to be supported by their cousins.
Thanks, Thomas. Yeah, I'm just gonna say real quick, we've got places on the board here on this slide where we've got some really great hatchery opportunity and some places where we fell short, didn't sort of meet our goals. So I want to make sure folks know, Thomas, I appreciate your comments, and we're going to try to do better next year in those specific areas you're thinking about where we've had multiple years of not putting hatchery fish in the creel. So thanks for flagging it. It's on our mind too.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have 2 minutes left. Our most likely last hand is from caller ending in 385. Go ahead. Looks like you're unmuted. Okay. And we will go to the next hand, which is Brad. Brad, go ahead.
Hey, thanks for having me and having this meeting. I just wanted to kind of reiterate the sonar thing. I spoke to some friends that work on the Kenai, and they're using the Sound Metrics ARIS sonar. It's surprising to me that we're reliant on such poor methods of, for in-season closures. Like we thought for a lot of these systems that we'd be fishing until March 31st last year, at least. That March 1 closure came as a surprise. And it seems like, especially with kind of the varied water conditions we've gotten, that using native nets and red counts really early on in the season is a bad approach. So I think it would give everybody a lot more confidence if there was at least a plan to implement sonar on these critical rivers, and especially because some of the systems, it just seems like a great opportunity. And then also to reflect what Jacob said earlier, I fish the Oregon North Coast a lot. We have had years where we had bad hatchery returns and bad wild returns, but we have survived. And I think a big part of that is using these broodstock hatchery programs, and we haven't had to close down and our escapement has been quite good for many, 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 many years. So it's surprising that it doesn't seem like part of the plan for resurrecting these fisheries and giving more angler opportunity in the coming years is to implement a angler caught wild broodstock program similar to, the Wilson. I mean, the Wilson and Nestucca do not have a tenth of the habitat, as far as the wilderness and the river size and the other benefits that the OP has. Why aren't we using these programs that work so well even on less habitat rich rivers? So it would really give me some hope if that was part of the plan going forward.
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, I'll just say it again. I think I've said it a dozen times over the last couple months. I can't express how appreciative we are of all of you spending your time with us over the last couple months, trying to get this stuff figured out. I know that there's some folks who are kind of happy tonight, kind of middle of the road, and some folks that are really disappointed. I want you to know that we are too. But with that, again, appreciate you taking the time. Look for the regs to be coming out within the next couple days. And, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, the conversations with the co-managers are going to continue. But with that, I hope you have a good night. And again, thanks for being here with us this evening. Take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks all.